Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. What another amazing day it is. We have victory out of Virginia. The redistricting battle, the rigged gerrymander now being struck down by the Virginia Supreme Court. We've got the full decision queued up. We'll read through it. We'll see what the dissenters had to say. It was a close one, 4-3. And we have reaction to this because the Democrats are melting down. There was a crazy lady bouncing around outside of the courthouse, screaming and shouting at the Supreme Court there. We have Hakeem Jeffries, who can barely speak in the aftermath of this thing. And they're promising to continue on. I don't know exactly how that will go for them, but the gerrymander war continues all throughout America. And so this may be a nice victory, but the battle's not over quite yet. So we'll go through it. We'll see what the latest is. A lot of reaction and some very good and fun memes coming out in the aftermath of this that we'll take a look at. JD Vance as Techno Viking and other things. And then we got some UFO files that dropped, and we got some interesting stuff here queued up on these. Some videos with some explanations, a little bit of history about the Gemini missions and the Apollo 11 mission. We got transcripts. We've got FBI 302s all related to these floating and flying orbs. And Tim Burchett said, we have seen nothing yet. So there will be more coming soon, according to him, and it's going to get juicier here on out. But now declassified, and we're excited to be here. Thank you for joining us. Let's make sure the tubes are working. Before we jump into it, sometimes they do not connect, and that's always a problem. And let's see. Locals looking good, YouTube looking good, Rumble looking good. It's great to be here. That means we're 3x3. We can get started. So let's do it, shall we? Starting right here. Victory out of Virginia. The state Supreme Court coming down and striking down the gerrymandered rigged maps. We know that they tried to reverse the state from a 6-5 even split, blues versus the reds, into a 10-1 total scam, and the referendum went through, barely passed. Now all of it coming to a crashing close. We'll take a look at the decision and some reaction, but first, here is the president who said the following: huge win for the Republican Party and America in Virginia. The Virginia Supreme Court has just struck down the Democrats' horrible gerrymander, Make America Great Again, signed by your favorite president, Donald J. Trump. And to show the opposite side of this and how upset the Democrats are, there was this woman being reported by this guy called Tyler Englander. He's over as a Virginia State Capitol reporter for 8 News out there. He said Michelle Jump came from Henrico to protest the Supreme Court of Virginia's ruling. This is how the other side is taking it. She is shouting shame and says the Supreme Court silenced the people. I don't know about that. It was an illegal ballot measure. It should have never been on there because, as the majority of the Virginia Supreme Court found, they did it illegally. Hear more from 8 News, but here is what it sounded like. This lady was basically by herself, this poor old guy, walking with a cane. He's just trying to get into the building, and this is what he needs to deal with outside of the Supreme Court there in Virginia. Let me boost this volume up here just a little bit for us so you can hear her screeching. Here's what she said. So definitely a stable person who's having a very normal reaction to this. Not happy about it, but that just goes to show you how good it is. And Hakeem Jeffries is not far off from this lady. She is having a meltdown outside the court. Hakeem basically did the same thing. And even CNN is admitting that the Democrats really blew this thing. They spent tens of millions of dollars, some numbers I've seen, about $38 million, to try to buy off 4 seats or so and then steal it from the rest of their fellow Virginians out there. But the decision came down very unequivocal. You see out after we saw the beautiful decision out of Tazewell County. And it's a 46-pager, so we'll hit the highlights and then take a look at just some of the dissent to see what they're so upset about. But we've spent a lot of time on this. It's finally coming to fruition, and it is a little bit surprising, right? Because we've seen here on this channel, we covered a lot of the 2020 election shenanigans and theft. And what we saw then is that no judge wanted to, disenfranchise the voters. Once a big vote happened, nobody wants to stand up and say, actually, that was illegal or there was a problem with it. But this time they did. And there were some rumors that it was going to go this way because the longer that the decision took, the less time they would have to certify and reprint the ballots and draw all the new rigged districts and so on and so forth. And so a glorious day, they dropped it on a Friday. And here's what they said. All right, on March 6, 2026, the General Assembly of Virginia submitted to Virginia voters a proposed constitutional amendment that authorizes partisan gerrymandering of congressional districts across the state. Now, we hold that the legislative process employed to advance this proposed amendment violated the Constitution of Virginia. And this constitutional violation incurably taints the resulting referendum vote and nullifies its legal efficacy. So you lose. Now, for the sake of simplicity, they're going to refer to all of the appellants as the Commonwealth and all of the appellees as the claimants. And that's how we'll distinguish this. More background. They say this case comes to us with a historical background. Now, it does not determine the outcome of the legal disputes presently before the court, which are entirely procedural, but it does explain the context in which these disputes have arisen. From Madison's era to the present, political parties of every stripe have offered, if by whiskey arguments, supporting partisan gerrymandering. It's part of American history and tradition. Whoever draws the maps wants to draw them in their favor, and somebody has to draw the maps, and so they're always a little bit skewed in favor of one side or the other. Now, since that time until today, these arguments have been criticized by thoughtful jurists and legal scholars. Justice Kagan on the U.S. Supreme Court said, partisan gerrymanders deprive citizens of their most fundamental of their constitutional rights. So this is great because they're citing a very liberal judge. So that crazy lady screaming outside the court, she can look back to Kagan for the majority's guidance on this decision. And of course, this is from all the court who is writing this, but it is a 4-3 decision. Okay, so there's 7 people on the state Supreme Court of Virginia, but it's 4-3, 4 in favor, 3 against it in the dissent that we'll take a look at. Saying the gerrymander violates your right to participate equally in the political process, to join others, to advance your beliefs, and so on and so forth. Now, that was Judge Kagan, joined also with leftists Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG, Breyer, and Sotomayor in a prior case. So they're referencing the leftists. So they say, we're going to echo those warnings. Also, this guy, Professor A.E. Dick Howard, advocated that Virginia should amend its constitution to discourage, if not outright prohibit, this partisan gerrymandering that's done by the legislature. He argued that partisan gerrymandering undermines democracy itself and said a bunch about this. And a year after that optimistic prediction, where he said, we need to do something about it, Virginians voted by a wide margin to reform the redistricting process in the Commonwealth and to end the partisan gerrymandering. So we already had laws on the books to stop this from happening, but they didn't care. And of course, now they did it anyways. They adopted Article 2, Section 6A of the Virginia Constitution to create a specific commission for this called the Virginia Redistricting Commission. Under the 2020 amendment, if this bipartisan commission could not reach a consensus, the responsibility to achieve the amendment's ultimate goal, which is to rid political partisanship as much as possible in the redistricting, it would become the constitutional responsibility of the Supreme Court of Virginia. So they created a separate body, and maps can be more fair than less fair. We've talked about that a lot here. Compactness and contiguity. So rather than drawing these maps that look like tentacles that emerge out of the belly of the beast in the area of Alexandria and up near DC, where all the bureaucrats live, extending them all the way out and all the way out, You can draw compact maps that look like squares, that look like they are not drawn in the shape of lobsters and other things. So in 2021, partisan disputes in the Redistricting Commission deadlocked the 16-member commission. Now, when the task fell to us, to the Supreme Court in Virginia, pursuant to Article 2, Section 6A, we unanimously ordered that the prior maps be replaced with wholly new maps that commentators across a wide spectrum of political views later said were free of partisan bias. We understood back then, as we do today, that, quote, no tenet of free government is more fundamental than fairness in voting and representation. And this enduring principle was the anchoring ideal of the Constitution, Article 2, Section 6A, and the ultimate goal of the assigned redistricting task. Then we had some developments. On October 31, 2025, during a disputed 2024 special session, the General Assembly approved by a party line vote a proposed amendment to the Constitution there in Virginia that would suspend that provision of the Constitution that said actually go and use the Redistricting Commission in order to get a new map. In its place, they wanted an authorization for the General Assembly to read, not the commission, the legislature to redraw the congressional districts outside of the regular decennial census redistricting as a response to other states that are doing this. They said Texas is doing this. So the amendment would authorize this redistricting to happen this year, November 2026, in the congressional elections. Now, during the 2026 regular session that began in January, the General Assembly again voted by a party line vote to approve the amendment. In Feb 26, the General Assembly enacted and published a new map for the 11 districts that would be contingent upon a vote. The new districts replaced the existing nonpartisan map. That was a 6-5 split that split it between the political parties because Virginia is basically 50-50, with a highly partisan gerrymandered map that would shift everything to a 10-1. In favor of the blues, citing other things here. Now, under the new map, approximately 47% of the Virginians that voted for representatives of one of the major parties in the last election would now be represented by 9%. And they lecture us about democracy. While approximately 51% of the blues who voted for the other major party would now be represented by 91%. All of it. The General Assembly first submitted the constitutional amendment to the Virginia voters on March 6, 2026, the first day of early voting. Now, the submission was accompanied by a ballot asking voters to answer yes or no to the question of this garbage. Could you believe this? This was the ballot question. Do you want to restore fairness in upcoming elections? Basically, if you are not in favor of this, then you're anti-fairness. Okay, and even a 5-year-old doesn't want things to be not fair. So voting started on March 6th and ended on April 21st. Now, of the total number of all votes, approximately 45% were cast during the early voting period, and 55% were cast on the final day of the election. The Elections Board reported on April 30th, not long ago, that 1.6 million Virginians had cast a yes vote to restore fairness on the ballot question, and 5 million Virginians had cast no votes. Approximately 3% of the total votes separated yes from no, and so a majority will of the people was secured by yes voters, representing 1.69 of the total votes cast. Continuing. In Section 2, explaining, in a constitutional republic, it is emphatically the province and the duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. That's Marbury versus Madison, one of the seminal cases in American law. Chief Justice Marshall then learned this truth 2 decades earlier from his former law professor. Sitting in our seat of judgment in 1782, Judge Wythe laid down 2 cornerstones of judicial review. It is the duty of the courts to declare the constitutional boundaries of political power and the courage to fearlessly protect them. His admonition was timeless. He said this: if the whole legislature An event to be deprecated should attempt to overleap the bounds prescribed to them by the people. I, in administering the public justice of the country, will meet the united powers at my seat in this tribunal. And pointing to the Constitution, I will say to them, the legislature, here is the limit of your authority, and hither shall you go, but no further. You can come right up to this, but don't you even dare cross that line there, punks. I think that's a separate quote from him. Consistent with this Virginia tradition, quote, the Judiciary Department has the power and it's its duty to pass upon the validity of a constitutional enactment when put in force by legally questionable means. A constitution, by its very nature, declares under what circumstances and in what manner it shall be amended, and it is the supreme law of the land to which all persons, rulers, as well as citizens must bow in obedience. So it follows that the judiciary, the courts, has the ultimate authority to determine what is valid and not. And that's what we're doing here. So it is fair to ask whether we could have or should have reviewed the constitutionality of this before it went to the voters. And I would argue that, yeah, I mean, it would have been nice if they would have just said, no, obviously this is illegal. Don't put it up there. Don't have a bunch of people vote on it. But it is not a question the Commonwealth should ask. Throughout this litigation, they have insisted, they've said, okay, the Virginia Democrats have said, you can't rule on this until after it's over, because this is their tactic. They want the elections to be done and passed because they know that most judges are not going to have the stones to undo the will of the people. So the Democrats said, you have to have the election first before you're allowed to rule on it. So they said, okay, guess we'll do that. They've insisted that we cannot lawfully decide this before the vote. In its motion for a stay in this case, they argued that longstanding Virginia precedent was virtually indistinguishable from this case, and they said courts cannot interfere to stop any of the proceedings while this permanent law is in the process of being made. You can't object to how they made your sandwich until you get it. And only upon the completion of the proceedings, the validity of the amendment is assailed on the ground that the Constitution has not been complied with, then the courts can pass upon the validity of the amendment. Now, the Commonwealth, the Virginians, also said the lesson is clear. Courts may not preemptively invalidate a proposed amendment before it has been passed. So they said, fine, we'll wait. Now they're complaining, well, the court should have given us a ruling on this. You made us waste a bunch of money, waste a bunch of time, print a bunch of ballots, conduct an entire election, and then you reversed it. Yeah, that's what you wanted. And the Democrats are in charge, right? They've got the governorship, they've got the AG's office, they've got the legislature, and so on and so forth. So having successfully insisted over the objection of the claimants, the people challenging the maps, that we postpone the judicial review until after the election process, it might be tempting for the Commonwealth to think that the final vote implicitly stacks the deck in its favor. Again, you don't want to disenfranchise 1.6 million voters, do you? Perhaps enough so that the exercise of any judicial review could be viewed as an ultra-vires effort to overturn the will of the people. Now, if that supposition were true, that Scott, the prior case that they're referencing here, precedent, forbids pre-election challenges and that the will of the people forbids post-election challenges, then I guess there's nothing we can do. We can't object to it before, and then you say once the vote happens, we can't override the people, so I guess we just can't do anything. So I guess you guys are just doing whatever you want, and we just have to stand back and stand by. Then judicial review of allegedly unconstitutional procedures used to adopt a constitutional amendment would not exist. You would just have the whole Constitution be thrown in the shredder, which they probably would be happy with. Now, we respect in a footnote and accept the representation of Virginia's lawyers that no such assertion can be made. Now, at oral argument, the court asked them, I don't understand that as a legal argument, given that you asked us to invoke our Scott decision. It says you can't deal with these irregularities before the people have voted. So saying that the people have voted yes, after having said that you don't even look as to whether there are any procedural problems here, and the vote doesn't add anything to the equation, does it? They said no. And to be perfectly clear, we are not arguing that this court lacks jurisdiction to review whether the constitutional requirements have been complied with. It does. Instead, I'm saying that on the merits, You should not accept their arguments. The judge asked again. But the fact that there is a yes vote doesn't tell us anything about those merits, right? He said correctly, no, it doesn't. Okay, so in other words, their lawyer, back during oral argument, which we listened to here, confirmed the yes vote doesn't ratify, doesn't rubber stamp, doesn't give them cover. Their lawyer admitted it on the record. The judge asked about it twice in this subsection, in this footnote. So he says, now on the issues before us, we hold that the ultimate vote margin plays no role in the analytics of our judicial review of the constitutionality of this amendment process. Neither a high margin of success nor a single digit margin logically or legally matters. They could have been 60 to 40, could have been 75 to 25. Pick a number, doesn't matter. They said we can't decide on it until after the fact. So we waited. Now, it cannot be overstated in this section that we focus on the timing of certain injunctions. And if the electorate approves the proposed amendment, then we must exercise our constitutional duty to review the declaratory judgments before us on appeal and address de novo, brand new, fresh, what equitable remedies, if any, are appropriate. Continuing. Saying, now, the Constitution of Virginia, it mandates a detailed process governing the lawful adoption of these amendments. The procedural requirements may seem laborious to some, perhaps even painstakingly so. The ambition of a constitution, James Madison said, is to create a government for perpetuity, grounded by permanent principles and not on those of a temporary nature. Going back to the debates of James Madison. So for this reason, amending the Constitution necessitates compliance with the requirements of a lengthy, precise, and balanced procedure. It's the Constitution. It is the primary governing document. It is sacred in American law. It's very difficult to change it by design so that you've got continuity and precedent and the will of the people, the passions of democracy. Don't just wave it one way, wave it another. It's anchored. Strict compliance with these mandatory provisions is required in order that all amendments shall receive the deliberate consideration and careful scrutiny that they deserve. He says the opening sentence of Article 12, Section 1 states the first requirement for the non-convention method is the following. Writing, any amendment or amendments to this Constitution may be proposed in the legislature, and if the same shall be agreed to by a majority of the members elected to each of the two houses, that proposed amendment or amendments shall be referred to the General Assembly at its first regular session held after the next general election of the members of the House of Delegates. Clear timing delineated there in the Constitution. So under this provision, they explain, the General Assembly can propose amendments, but cannot adopt them. The inverse is also true. Virginia voters can adopt or reject amendments, but cannot propose them. The amendment process of dividing power between the people and their politicians has withstood the test of time for more than 100 years. So the legislature proposes it, but they can't just say, oh, this is a great, no, we should propose this. And then also, this is a great idea, so we'll vote on it. They have to hand it off to the people so that we have multiple avenues, multiple voices coming in to support it. Now, to guard against hasty changes to the Commonwealth organic laws, Section 1 also slow walks the constitutional amendment process. The General Assembly must twice vote in favor of a proposed amendment at two separate sessions with an intervening election in the House of Delegates. This gives voters two opportunities, one indirect and the other direct, to voice their views on the proposed amendment. The first is during an intervening election period between the two legislative sessions. Voters can support or defeat candidates for the House of Delegates who either endorse or oppose the amendment. If the Assembly votes against it at the next session, the process ends. If they vote in favor of it, then voters get a second direct opportunity to vote on the proposed amendment up or down the ballot. The efficacy of the second popular vote depends upon the reliability of the first. Now, the reasoning behind this is because a delegate called Slaughter, he stated back in 1969 during the debates over the 1971 amendments, is that constitutions should not be changed lightly. Not only Would there be an intervening House of Delegates election where you might be able to get the sentiment of the people on an amendment you had acted upon previously? But upon reflection, the General Assembly might decide not to submit that amendment. Now, in this case, the voting in the general election for the House of Delegates began on September 19, 2025, ended on Election Day, November 4th, 2025. The General Assembly also voted for the first time to propose the amendment to the electorate on October 31, 2025, right in between September, October, November. By that date, over 1.3 million votes had already been cast in the general election, which is approximately 40% of the total vote for that election cycle. Now, the Commonwealth sees nothing wrong with this sequence from Virginia because under its interpretation, the term general election only means the last day of the election, otherwise known as Election Day. Because Election Day was 4 days after October 31 and the vote to propose the amendment, the Commonwealth concludes that there was an intervening election in the 2024 special session, which included the first legislative vote for the amendment and the later session, which was the second vote. In other words, under Virginia's view, the Democrat Virginians, the 4-day period, which included a weekend, was the intervening period during which voters could find out what the amendment actually said, whether their candidate supported it or opposed it, and whether they wanted to use their vote to express a view. This view appears to be wholly unprecedented in Virginia's history. In the half century since the adoption of the 1971 Constitution, the General Assembly has approved 63 amendments for placement on the ballot. Voters have ratified 54 of them. Of these 63 proposals, the Commonwealth has identified none in which the General Assembly passed a proposed amendment after voting in the general election had already begun, because it was the first time. Now, as for the 1.3 million or so Virginians in this case who had voted before October 31st, the Commonwealth says that the clear purpose of the intervening election requirement was to provide them with the opportunity to elect delegates that will participate in the second vote. But early voters squandered that opportunity, they said. Well, you voted too early. That's your fault. By accepting the invitation to cast their vote 42 days before the 4-day period between October 31, the day the legislature voted to amend the Constitution, and November 4th, days later, the last day of voting in the election. So you shouldn't have voted early. You should have voted the day of. Now, under this thesis, early Virginia voters unknowingly forfeited their constitutionally protected opportunity to vote for or against delegates who favor or disfavor amending the Constitution by not anticipating a legislative vote on an amendment 4 days before the last day of voting. It's your fault. To be sure, under their logic, the legislative vote could just have well been 1 day before. Doesn't matter. So anything that gets passed must be passed before Election Day. And don't vote early if you want all of the latest news, according to them. Now, their position, though, finds no support in the Constitution or in the historical meaning of the word election. The predecessor of Article 12 first appeared back in 1870 in the Constitution. That Constitution set forth a 3-month publication requirement before and prior to the intervening election that also used the expression, quote, time of making such choice to describe the next general election. It required by the provision to occur between the first and the second legislative votes. Then we had 1902, 1928 Constitution. They replaced that time of making such choice with time of such election. Then in 1971, they removed the pre-publication requirement and left only the phrase next general election to mean the intervening election. Not one of those expressions since the amendment provision was first enacted in 1870 categorically limited the definition of election to a single day. And before evaluating the exegesis of the term election by legal scholars and courts, it is also worth observing that the Commonwealth's view would be unrecognizable to the average citizen. That perspective should not be scorned, but praised. As we have repeatedly said, the words of a constitution are to be understood in the sense in which they are popularly employed, unless the context or the very nature of the subject indicates otherwise. And thus, we are guided by the principle that the Constitution was written to be understood by the voters, the people. So with that perspective, imagine one of the over 1 million Virginians who had voted in person before Election Day in 2025 walking into a polling place. The voter says to the officer of the election, they say, "Hi, I'm a good citizen. I am here to vote in the election." The officer of the election responds, "We are not conducting an election here." He says, "But that's why I'm here," the voter says. "Well, maybe so, but let me explain," the election officer insists. "You can vote in the election, but we are not conducting an election today. Elections are only conducted on Election Day." He's saying, well, I'm here to vote in the election. So legal scholars and courts would have the same bewildered reaction as the hypothetical to the average citizen. The definition of election has always broadly denoted the act of choosing, citing some other dictionaries. And most, if not all, law lexicons treat this popular meaning as the technical definition of the word, citing a bunch of other dictionaries and more. Now, the lexical sense of the noun election must be distinguished from the noun phrase election day. The near universal definition of election day is a single day established by law for voters to cast ballots by presenting themselves in person at a precinct. So given both terms and giving them their intended meanings, the dictionary correctly observes in jurisdictions that allow early in-person voting, the election day is normally the last day on which voters may cast their ballot in a given election. The semantic differences between these terms have rich provenance. Beginning in the colonial days, it was common in Virginia and other colonies for elections to last for days as officials, usually sheriffs, canvassed the countryside to collect the votes. Following the English tradition, voting in an early American election continued until all the electors had been heard from or until the closing of the polls had been thrice proclaimed from the courthouse doors. In other colonies, eligible voters sent their votes by proxy to prevent the danger and damage that might result from them leaving their land to go vote in the election or to save them the inconvenience of a journey into capital town. These proxy votes, the precursor to today's absentee ballots, were in writing, they were sealed, and deputies selected by local voters would take them to the court of the election. In the mid-1800s, it was recognized during congressional debates that the vote in Virginia occurred by voice vote, and it frequently happened that all the votes were not polled in one day, including at the most recent election at Richmond and other places, quote from 1844. This occurred in a state circumstanced as Virginia was, large streams of water, inclement weather, and more. Now, while the events of the mid-1800s led to the laws establishing a single day for casting and receiving votes, modern election protocols eventually cycled back to the historical practice of permitting defined time frames. And that's what they have created. So all of these are combined actions that define the term election. It includes citizens casting votes from the beginning of the early voting period all the way up until Election Day, and the officers of the election receiving those votes and then closing the polls on Election Day. Where they permit in-person voting, they also explain the last day is the last day of the election. The definition is short and clear. History confirms that election includes both the ballot casting and the ballot receipt. With this definition in mind, then the Virginians, the Commonwealth, they implicitly concede that early voting is one of those combined actions because early voting is casting a ballot. When governing law authorizes citizens to cast ballots over a period of time, that goes into the election. That's a durational term. It fits perfectly with Election Day. The metes and bounds of an election begin with the point of casting votes and end with the point of receiving votes and then closing the polls. Election Day is the boundary marker for the end. The combined actions then define election, and that undermines their arguments about an election day. The Commonwealth states that the other section of the Constitution says it's one day, but they never use the word election, and they make no attempt to define that unmentioned term. The Constitution defines that election as occurring on the Tuesday succeeding the first Monday in November. Judge continues. Now, the date certain in the Constitution, when considered in the context of the provision and the verb phrase shall be elected, describes the time and the final act of an election. In legal argot, as well as common speech, a wedding can last for hours, but the bride and groom are not lawfully wed until the officiant declares them so at the end. Equally so here. A general election can take place over many days, but it culminates and ends on election day. The successful candidate shall be lawfully deemed to be, quote, elected no earlier than election day, the last day of voting in the election. Now, Virginia and the Commonwealth's contest with this reasoning begins well, but it ends poorly. As they correctly observe, courts often employ linguistic presumptions. One presumes that the same term used in separate statutes has the same meaning unless there's contrary indication. When applicable, this principle raises a rebuttable, not a conclusive presumption. As Justice Marshall explained, quote, "It has also been said that the same words have not necessarily the same meaning attached to them. When found in different parts of the same instrument, their meaning is controlled by context." And so what they overlook in Virginia is that an opposite presumption applies when there is a material variation in terms. This suggests a different meaning. Similar but not identical words in similar but not identical context should be presumed to refer to similar but not identical ideas. The noun phrase general election in section 1 is not the same as the verb phrase shall be elected. General election does not match shall be elected. The former denotes the cumulative actions of the voters, early voting, day of voting, in-person absentee. That's all a part of the general election. Then the later connotes a single day. Shall be elected is election day. At the conclusion of all of those cumulative actions, then somebody is legally declared the ultimate winner. This material variation connotes a variation in meaning. It's fully explained in a centuries-old definition of election, which also includes the act of casting the votes. That gives Virginia voters an opportunity to choose electors who will support or defeat the proposed amendments in this process. And so for these reasons, we hold that the definition of general election in our Constitution describes the combined actions of voters casting ballots and officers of elections receiving those votes and the closing of the polls on the last election day. The plain and ordinary meaning of the expression matches the historical definition that's embraced by courts and legal scholars. This article then requires an intervening general election, which is that whole thing. The early votes, the day of, the closing, the apps, all of it. After the first legislative vote in favor of a proposed amendment and prior to the second legislative vote before the assembly has the authority to submit the proposal to the voters. In this case, the Virginia legislature, passed the proposed constitutional amendment for the first time well after the voters had already begun casting their ballots during the general election. So they didn't wait. It was in the middle. Our colleagues in the dissent, they raised various objections to our reasoning. Some we have already addressed, but a few deserve some more specific responses. Several of their objections were even scarcely mentioned by the parties, either in their briefs in the circuit court or on appeal, or one was not even mentioned at all. In our view, none of these objections undermine our interpretation of what election means. The lead argument relies on Article 2, Section 4. That empowers the General Assembly to regulate the time, place, manner, conduct, and the administration of elections and to make any other law not inconsistent with the Constitution. They then point to various statutory provisions sprinkled through other provisions of the law that they argue take precedent over the Constitution. They, for example, call our attention to this section of the Virginia Code. A single sentence in their opening brief on page 32 from the legislator's brief also mentions that definition. Neither the dissent nor the legislator's opening brief, however, acknowledge the statute's preamble. The preamble says the definitions in the code do not apply when context requires a different meaning. Now, for his part, the AG of Virginia, the chief executive of the Department of Law, does not once mention that in any of his briefs, nor did his earlier official advisory opinion issued on behalf of the Commonwealth cite that at all. Now, at any rate, we place little or no interpretive weight on these definitions, given that they are expressly stated inapplicable when context requires a different meaning. A self-limiting statutory definition cannot supersede the literal text, drafting history, historical context, unambiguous purpose. And so this reinforces a truism by stating that its authorization does not contemplate regulating elections when it's inconsistent with the Constitution. The same conclusion applies to the argument that the statute authorizing early voting is prior to any election, that displaces what we're saying. The term general election in this provision first appeared in the Constitution in 1870. Then they enacted this code 149 years later in 2019. The inferential meaning attributed by the dissent to this modern statute is a weak reed on which to challenge the settled historical meaning of the word election. They then cite a different case from 1928 called Moore versus Pullum. We do too, but for different reasons. First, Moore held nearly a century ago that the then existing law for absentee voting should be liberally construed to the absentee voter, particularly in light of the enlightened and aroused public opinion, which they want to have in the election. Okay, people want to vote. If Moore were rewritten today, we are confident that it would say that precluding 1.3 million early voters back in 2025 from having a say in this ongoing debate, that would be a truly illiberal construction of Virginia law. And second, that other case also recognized that the Constitution of Virginia can expressly or by necessary implication defeat any contrary interpretation of a statute governing the right to vote. We certainly agree. And none of the code provisions relied upon by the dissent can overcome the historic meaning of general election, which the Constitution explains. The meaning of election is fixed as the combined actions of the voters casting the ballot and the people receiving those ballots on the last day of the election. The General Assembly can exercise its authorities within these conceptual boundaries, but the General Assembly cannot change by ipse dixit the definition of a general election, simply by passing a law declaring it to be that way. They then say that our other interpretation of Article 12, Section 1 would cause our courts to sit relatively idle for more than 25% each year. Now, they've never, Virginia, made this rather extreme argument in any of its 20-plus briefs or motions filed by this with 16 lawyers. Because our colleagues in dissent make it on their own, we should still address it, though. They say Article 2, Section 9 says that no voter during the time of holding any election at which he is entitled to vote shall be compelled to perform military service, nor be compelled to show up as a juror, witness, and other things. This deals with compulsion that would cause a voter to lose the opportunity to vote. So you just say, oh, well, the Republicans are going to be voting now? Okay, let's draft all the Republicans and send them off to war and then remove their right to vote. And then we have no more Republican voters. That's compulsion. Some might argue this provision only precludes compulsion that would interfere with one-day access. Under this view, the voter could vote during the election period and the Constitution would not be implicated. Now, to us, this clever argument is a story of tail wagging the dog that has no tail. The meaning of this section was never addressed by the circuit court, never mentioned in any legal briefs, and not discussed during oral arguments. Of the two interpretations of the anti-compulsion policy, neither one contradicts what the phrase election means. Then they go on to suggest that their interpretation injects unnecessary confusion about who can vote and when. We don't find it confusing. Article 4, Section 5 provides that any person may be elected who is 21 years of age at the time of the election. Now, the phrase at the time of the election is, again, viewed in the context. The phrase may be elected has a similar connotation to shall be elected, and likewise may be elected refers only to the final act of the election when they are deemed to be elected by the majority. It's like they just play dumb, you know? Well, I mean, if you say it's this, then how does it define that? It thus follows that at the time of the election means the time when a senator or delegate is deemed elected. We see no unnecessary confusion when viewed through this lens. And so finally, we address the dissent's claim that by extending elections in Virginia beyond a single day, they say the majority's formulation would directly conflict with the federal mandate that elections are held on one day. We disagree. The U.S. Supreme Court has held that if an election does take place, it may not be consummated prior to the federal election day. Federal courts also reviewing these things have applied this holding to uphold those laws. This holding in Foster said, so long as a state does not conclude an election prior to federal election day, it's not in conflict. Same thing in the Ninth Circuit. Fifth Circuit has come to the same conclusion. No persuasive, much less binding federal law supports your claim that this violates the supremacy clause of the Constitution. And so we fully acknowledge Ralph Waldo Emerson's warning that a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. Great quote, 1841. As our dissenting colleagues suggest, it truly would be foolish for us to assign a diktat a specific inflexible meaning to the words elected or election. Used in many diverse ways, they are used in common speech. We are not attempting to do that. Now, the antidote to Emerson's warning is Justice Scalia, may he rest in peace, his reminder that in textual interpretation, context is everything. And the context of the Constitution tells us not to expect nitpicking detail. Context also includes common sense. Justice Barrett also adds, which is another thing that goes without saying. So to us, it is common sense. The phrase general election, as used in the Virginia Constitution, includes the combined actions of citizens casting votes and election officials receiving these votes and closing the polls on the last day of the election. The purpose of the Constitution is to give voters the opportunity to participate in the process of this. It would be a foolish consistency if we insisted, and we do not, that the historical definition of election applies in exactly the same way to the plethora of different legal texts ensconced in different contexts. The dissent does just that with its inflexible one-size-fits-all definition of an election as a single 24-hour period, the last day of the voting. In that inflexibility deployed by the Commonwealth, if they adopted that, they ended up denying 1.3 million. Those are the real disenfranchised folks. Their right to have a voice in the debate over this amendment process, and therefore they're the ones that eroded the core rights that the Constitution was intended to safeguard. Now, the Commonwealth is free by its lights to do the right thing for the right reason, and while they can, the rule of law requires that it be done the right way. Under Virginia's Constitution, the right way necessitates compliance with a deliberate, lengthy, precise, and balanced procedure for amendments. Strict compliance is required in order to ensure that they get the deliberate consideration and careful scrutiny that they deserve. In this case, the Commonwealth submitted a proposed amendment to Virginia voters in an unprecedented manner that violated the intervening election requirement under the Constitution. This violation irreparably undermines the integrity of the resulting referendum vote and renders it null and void. For this reason, the congressional maps issued by this court in 21, pursuant to the Constitution lawfully passed, they remain the governing maps for the upcoming 2026 congressional elections, and the lower level decision is hereby affirmed. Dun, 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 victory. Now, the dissent, we saw a lot of them. Their arguments were all cobbled together here. Their main argument is that election is a single day, and so there was no time problem, okay, that they didn't actually have to give those 1.3 million people an opportunity to participate in it because it only said on that one day, and they weren't cut off during the early voting period. And I was just scrolling through here to see if there was any, whining and moaning here. But they did a good job, I think, dismantling all of their arguments. And so you get the gist of it. But there was still a three-party dissent here that was signed off on by Chief Justice Powell, Justice Mann, and Justice Fulton in dissenting. But the decision is now laid out. Those gerrymandered maps are now invalid. The Tazewell decision that said the whole thing cannot be certified, they cannot go forward with it, has been rejected. His decision has been upheld. The certification has been rejected. And justice has been served in Virginia. And any arguments that they shouldn't have had the election are mooted by the fact that they were the ones saying you can't make a decision on this until the vote happens. So they got what they wanted. And they tried to have it both ways. They tried to say that you can't rule this unconstitutionally too early, and after it's over and we won, you can't undo the will of the Virginian people. So either way, from their perspective, there is no constitutional scrutiny allowed. And Democrats win no matter what. That's essentially their argument. So that has failed dramatically. And the real people disenfranchised were the 1.3 million people who are not afforded the constitutional protections of having their say in this entire process. So every time we hear somebody lecturing us about they overrode the will of the people, they voted 51% for this thing illegally. It presumably never would have gotten this far if they would have followed the rules, which is, of course, why they did not follow the rules. Now, the Democrats are melting down over this. Attorney General Jay Jones, he's the guy in the text messages who said he wants to put bullets in the head of his political opponents or whatever. He said today, the Supreme Court of Virginia has chosen to put politics over the rule of law. No. You guys didn't follow the rule of law. That's why you just lost. By issuing a ruling that overturns the April 21st special election, this decision silences the voices of the millions of Virginians, and it fuels the growing fears about the state of our democracy, which means democratic dictatorship, which means we're pretty happy with the outcome because we definitely don't want a democratic dictatorship. And the best response to this dude, now with 16,000 likes, said, hey, Jay Jones, I hope you're not going to kill the justices in front of their children for disagreeing with you about your unconstitutional gerrymander. Coming over from Molly Hemingway, she's amazing, over at the Federalist. You're not going to assassinate anyone over there or text somebody that you're about to shoot him in the head. Are you, Jay? And yeah, he got elected out there in Virginia. So here's what Fox News said about this, as this was all breaking this morning, and some of what they're hearing from inside the Beltway.
From the Virginia State Supreme Court ruling the process to redraw that state's congressional maps is unconstitutional. They had a referendum on this statewide. Shannon Bream is here to join Instant Reaction. Shannon, welcome to our coverage. Good day to you. A couple of things here just come to mind. Barack Obama was out there campaigning to make sure people were into this issue and would get out. It passed, but not by a lot, but it did pass. And it would have effectively, Democrats believe, made it 10-1 Democrats to Republicans. I think the current figuration is 6-5.
Right.
So this is thrown out. Is that the end of the line for now, Shannon?
It sounds like it, because this was an issue of the Virginia Constitution. It was a state law issue, and critics of this referendum have said from the beginning that Democrats were on thin ice because they did not follow procedures as outlined by state law and state constitution. And what the court ended up saying here is that violation irreparably undermined the integrity of the entire voting referendum, said it makes it null and void. And for that reason, they say the congressional district maps issued by the court in 2021, the old maps are the ones that they've got to use for the upcoming congressional election. Now, this was a state matter. Virginia's Supreme Court, the highest court in that state, it's a Commonwealth, they'll remind you, made this decision. Now, it's not out of the realm of possibility that challengers to this decision would try to find some federal hook for it, to try to get to the Supreme Court to say that there is some U.S. constitutional violation in the way that this ruling was made. It's a very tough ask, but I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do it, because what have you got to lose at this point?
Well, what they have to lose is face. I didn't have time to pull the Hakeem Jeffries soundbite of Ren right afterwards, and he went to the podium and he said, FAFO, and we've got you. And then for like 48 hours, there was news coverage saying, well, the Democrats really flipped the script of redistricting on the president. Then this week, the president won those races in Indiana to try to put that back in. You had Tennessee do what it did. You had the Supreme Court just last week. And so now I sort of feel that the Virginian Democrats irritated everybody, made everybody mad, and then they lost. And so what they could lose is, one, self-respect maybe, but also funding and the seats that they thought they were going to win.
Yeah, and the momentum, because as you mentioned, all of those things are such huge developments. That Calais decision out of the Supreme Court last week triggered what we just saw in Tennessee. Alabama's going to make a run at it. Louisiana has to. South Carolina may be in the mix. So while Democrats have seemed to be gaining sort of a net advantage in a lot of what they've done in the redistricting, and they point to Republicans, you guys started this in Texas, those decisions, and this one today that just landed, they are big wins for Republicans.
And you add that to the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, and all the racist gerrymandered maps that are now also being evaporated. And the Texans didn't start this, okay? Look at the states in the New England area. Zero Republicans across the board. Look at Massachusetts and New Hampshire and all these other places that don't offer even a single House representative for any Reds anywhere up there. And so now the Republicans are just wising up and playing the Democrat game. And how dare Texas do this to us? It's like that meme with the guy who puts the stick in his own spoke on his bicycle and then flips over and he's like, I can't believe the Republicans attacked me. Okay, you guys have been doing this for years. Look at California and elsewhere. So here's what CNN was saying about this. Kind of a funny clip because they spent millions, tens of millions of dollars on this. And I don't know if, as they were saying on Fox, they really care about self-respect. I don't think they have a lot of that. But here's what CNN said. This is a big blow. It's been a big waste of money. There was a lot of effort in on this. We had the Senator Luis Lucas out in Virginia who was saying, don't lecture us. You can go sit there in the cuck chair and watch it from there. Let us do whatever we want. And they got a little bit big for their britches out there. But then now they did the whole thing illegally, and they probably never suspected that a Supreme Court of their state would actually reverse this, especially after the vote. But that just happened, and now they're realizing it here on CNN.
This is a big blow. Hakeem Jeffries. I basically wrote a column that was like, this was great for Hakeem Jeffries because he was all in on it. $38 million spent from a group affiliated with him. Obama was in on this. And now this is a big defeat. And one of the reasons why Virginia was so important as well was Democrats were anticipating this Supreme Court decision, which is also going to have massive effects. So they felt like they've got this sort of tranche of 4 seats. And now, of course, that's gone. Again, they're still hopeful that they can maybe get 1 or 2 of these seats. But it has been a big, big waste of money. They'll have to pivot maybe to 2028 because this was a procedural decision. It looks like the voters, at least by a small margin, wanted these maps, but they're going to have to wait at least 2 years to get these maps.
Yeah, and they'll be back. They're like the Terminator. They just keep coming and coming and coming. But we also saw Hakeem came out today and could hardly speak. Here's what he said actually, this was on April 22nd, it looks like. Here's what he said previously. This is that clip that I think they were referencing on Fox.
Our message to Florida Republicans is F around and find out. If they go down the road of a DeSantis dummy-mander, the Florida Republicans are going to find themselves in the same situation as Texas Republicans, who are on the run right now.
No, they're not. Texas is doing well, too. So Hakeem is struggling out there, having a difficult time, and the RNC is celebrating. This is Kirsten Pelz. She is the spokesperson, the secretary, national press secretary for Republicans. And here's what she had to say over on Newsmax today in the aftermath of this victory.
And really, shooting down their hopes to win the midterms here. What do you make of this development?
This is a major victory for the RNC. This fight began for the RNC back in October when we led this charge against the Democrats' unconstitutional gerrymandering scheme led by Abigail Spanberger and the radical Democrats in Virginia. They dumped millions of dollars into this scheme, and it was ultimately struck down because it was wrong and unconstitutional. And now the Democrats in the state are not going to get away with writing Republican representation out of the state of Virginia. Again, this could not be more emphasized what a massive win this is for Republicans, for the RNC, for our legal fight in the state. And I think, again, this is a victory for Republicans in the state of Virginia who are not going to have their voices silenced.
Yep, exactly right. And the RNC chair was out, Chairman Joe Gruters. He said the RNC won big in Virginia today. We will not let the Democrats rig our elections. RNC, very happy about this decision.
Joe Gruters, RNC chairman here. I was on the way to Alaska when I heard the news about the Virginia maps. The Democrats spent tens of millions of dollars trying to pass these illegal maps. We sued, we won, and now it's about making sure we deliver for the president in the midterms. Let's join up, go to GOP.com, join our efforts. Let's win these midterms for this president so we can continue the great momentum.
All right, let's go. So that's RNC. And there were memes flying around all day today. Trump War Room posted JD Vance as the Techno Viking. Think this is a real video of JD walking down the street over in Europe. Looking good, JD. Here's some tunes. All right, so JD's celebrating, And we also saw this one of President Trump, little Friday fun in the dance club, having a good time as well, celebrating just the continual victories out of SCOTUS and now the Virginia SCOTUS as well. Here's President Trump. I said, ooh. Yeah, he's just feeling good. He's feeling those vibes. All right, so that's some good, delicious memery that's all over out there. People are celebrating. The Democrats, meanwhile, are screaming at the buildings and sound like this.
Shame on every single Supreme Court justice who voted to take away our rights.
All right, so she doesn't have a lot of colleagues out there. So now this is a settled case. Hakeem posted a statement after the fact saying he's going to investigate everything that they can do. You know, arguably they could take it up to the U.S. Supreme Court, but this was a state issue on the state constitution, and I'm not sure if the Supreme Court, especially a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court, is going to tell them that their interpretation of their own constitution is illegal. So they're mostly out of options, and this will be the, hopefully, end of it this cycle. But like the Democrats, they never will let it go. These people are like crack addicts for power, and so they'll try everything else that they possibly can to respond in other states and very likely come back in Virginia down the line. But the precedent has been set. The Constitution exists for a reason. You have to follow it. We know that they cheat in many other regards, like trying to throw the president off the ballot or trying to incarcerate him before the elections even occur because they're cheaters. But in this case, court stopped them dead in the tracks, and we're going to keep our eye on any further developments here and continue our coverage of the great gerrymander war that we're in the middle of right now. Thank you for joining and subscribing as we do. All right. Now, you know what time it is? UFO time, baby. We've got some interesting releases today. I will say that. And here's what Trump said. UFO files now released and declassified by President Trump. Hegseth making the announcement and releasing some very interesting videos. I've got a bunch of stuff queued up here like this one. We've got some PDF files that are here from the Apollo 11 technical crew briefing in a conversation between Neil Armstrong and others who are seeing some really funky things out there in outer space. And we'll go through it all, but here's how it broke today. He said, "As for my promise to you, the Department of War has released the first tranche of the UFO UAP files to the public for their review and study. In an effort for complete and maximum transparency, it was my honor to direct my administration to identify and provide government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, UAP, unidentified flying objects, and more. Whereas previous administrations have failed to be transparent on this subject, with these new documents and videos, the people can decide for themselves. What the hell is going on? Have fun and enjoy." President Donald J. Trump. And I don't know that they know the answer to that question. What the hell is going on? You kind of want an explanation, but that's the whole point. They're unidentified. They don't know what they are. And we'll show you the videos, and presuming that they're real, and certainly seems like they are, I don't know that you're going to be able to figure it out either, because the military doesn't even know what's happening. Hegseth said the Department of War is in lockstep with President Trump to bring unprecedented transparency about our government's understanding of these unidentified anomalous phenomena. These files, hidden behind classifications, have long fueled justified speculation. And it's time the American people see it for themselves. This release of declassified documents demonstrates that Trump and the administration's earnest commitment to unprecedented transparency, and Tulsi Gabbard from the ODNI said the same. Said the American people have long sought transparency about the knowledge of these UAP. Under Trump's leadership, the Office of the DNI is actively coordinating the intelligence community's declassification efforts with the Department of War to ensure a careful, comprehensive, and unprecedented review of our holdings to provide the American people with maximum transparency. Today's release is the first in what will be an ongoing joint declassification and release effort, courtesy of Tulsi. And so the whole tranche was dropped over at war.gov/UFO. Looks like this. Trump said, "I will direct all of these files to be released." And here's what it looks like if you travel over there. So There are 161 files organized by various agencies. The release dates all posted here, so more will be coming soon. The incident date and the incident location. You also have videos, images, and PDF files, and these have been going around the internet all day long. I've got some of the best that I came across here today to share with you, starting with this one. Here is this one. It was taken October 1, 2023, and it is called the Unresolved USAIP AP Report from Greece, October 23. They write, the United States Central Command submitted a report of an unidentified anomalous phenomenon called a UAP to the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. It consists of 2 minutes and 57 seconds of video footage from an infrared sensor aboard a U.S. military platform in 2023. An accompanying mission report, which we'll look at, also described this as flying near the surface of the ocean and making multiple 90-degree turns at approximately 80 miles per hour. And we'll go through the video, but here's the breakdown. At 4 seconds in, there's an area of contrast that enters the sensor field of view from the bottom left quarter of the screen. Then from about 7 seconds to 19 seconds, the area of contrast moves back and forth horizontally across the field of view as the sensor pans to track it. The area of contrast then, at about 20 seconds all the way up to 1 minute, remains generally centered within the sensor field of view. Then the sensor designates an area with this blue reticle, synchronizing its motion with the area of contrast relative position. Sensor continues to follow it, and we'll actually look at the full report that accompanied this. You can see mission report was drafted about this. It's very short, not a lot of details, but here's what the full video looks like. We want to go full screen for this puppy so we can follow along and see exactly what's happening. Now, no audio here, but here's the image. So they're looking at the ocean, just to be clear. There it is right there. Look at this anomalous object flying around. And you might think, well, you know, it's like lens flare or there's some goop on the camera screen. And then it goes and changes 90 degrees. There's a little blip over there. Camera's still calculating. Zips back down all over the ocean. And apparently it's going like 80 miles an hour. Do you know anything that can do that? So then they go to try to track it. So you see the sensor pops up there in the blue box with the crosshairs. And this thing is still zooming around. So they're on the ocean, and it looks like the aircraft, whatever the military vehicle is also in transit. Then they go to zoom in on it, and they ping it and to isolate it. They hold on to it. Now they've got it centered right in the box. And they're following it. Now it's not doing the zigging and zagging, the 90-degree turns going, 80, 90 miles an hour. We'll read the report. And they hold it for a little bit, and then they ultimately lose it. So this is about a 2-minute video. We've got about 90 seconds left here. They've got it targeted, locked on, like in the Top Gun movies. And some good comments. Yeah, could it be a laser? It's almost like somebody is shining a powerful laser like what you do with a cat up on the sky. But in this case, it's kind of near the ocean. So is this a Chinese satellite that's beaming a laser down and zipping around like you do with your cat or your dog? Then they lock onto it. And you're going to see, it looks like they activate some other equipment here. And then eventually they lose it. So then we've heard, on Joe Rogan and other interviews that sometimes these things will just cross the air and the water barrier and just zip back into the ocean. So as we get there, it's gone. Just drops off and it's gone. Didn't see it pop off your screen anywhere else and it's gone. So now we lost it, and they confirm all of that in their report. Now they're looking around for it. Where the hell was that? The main targeting box goes off, zooms all the way back out. You can see on the kind of the bigger box now goes out. Where it was that? Where'd it go? And it's just gone. So that's that one. We don't see it pop back up on the screen, but we do have a report that was accompanying this from the people who were on board that aircraft. And let me share that with you so you can see exactly what they were talking about. that was drafted in this report. Opening this link in a new tab. And here's what this one looks like. So the narrative here is at 2339Z, redacted, and they redacted a lot of these names just to keep the identities of the pilots and so on all secret, took off from LGLR. At 52, handed over from the LRE, proceeded to fragged tasking to support data mass. Then at 13Z, this person was 7-lined to support data mass redacted, arrived on station at that time, checked in with data mass and performed FMV SIGINT collection at this location. Then at 35, someone observed 1X possible UAP, see UAP1, 35Z. Then at 1011Z, returned to base at 1213, handed back to the LRE, 1309, landed at OGMS. Full motion video was exploited by GET, 1330 mission hours, 0629 FMV hours, taskings prosecuted. So we get a bunch of details here. Classification, probably, classified. Operation, redacted. CENTCOM, and more details here. Tasking order, ATO mission number, rank of this person, redacted. Phone number, email, redacted. It's like a report. We got another approver of the document. Some ingest stuff, all blank here. ACE quip here. Aircraft call sign, 1.4A. A lot of all this empty. More empty blocks here. We got a timeline. One aircraft, aircraft type redacted, aircraft tail number redacted. Context, gentext. Transited and landed at this place to replace the Lightning line that landed at LGLR yesterday. More redactions here. Then we see just a little bit of a snippet of some other explanations. Upon arrival, this person observed no EEI-related activity. Between these times, shifted eyes to multiple COIs conducting POL, identifying obstructions to HLZS, route analysis, and characterizing human or vehicle traffic. Conducted POL on multiple COIs until RTB, speaking in military coded language. And then at the bottom here, so they walk us through what they saw with the UAP right here. UAP propulsion means unknown. Payload, nothing. UAP signatures, none. Frequency, unknown. UAP advanced capabilities, yes, no, described, if not, unknown. Duration, unknown. Effects on persons, no. Objects material recovered, no. Effects on equipment, none. Observer engagement, no. First coordinates at this location, first seen radius 5, last accuracy estimated, last coordinates there. Kinetic altitude estimated, depth estimated, kinetic velocity. So that thing's going 80 miles an hour, right? So they're on some aircraft and they're saying this thing's going fast. So also UAP reaction, unknown. First accuracy estimated, call sign, other things. Here's the final text. Seemingly circular, too small to make out details, was at 35. This person was en route to their target when they spotted a UAP flying just above the surface of the ocean water. The UAP took multiple 90-degree turns at an estimated 80 miles per hour. Then at 38, they lost the UAP from their feed. That's the game. I'm not sure exactly what that was. Nobody knows. But here is another one. So we saw this one was from 2013. Very curious one. They tell us the U.S. Central Command submitted a report of another unidentified craft consisting of 1 minute and 46 seconds of video from an infrared sensor on board a U.S. military platform in 2013. No additional report on this one, but it comes from the Middle East in 2013 is what they're reporting here. We have a sensor field of view, narrows to zoom in, then the area of contrast moves within the sensor field of view, followed by a visible tail. Then the area of contrast leaves the sensor field of view at the bottom right. Following an apparent cut at 35 seconds, we see an area of contrast remains within the sensor, and we see this very interesting 8-pointed star with arms of alternating length that then pop into frame. And once again, let's go full screen for this so we can get the full details. Here is this video released by the Department of War. So 2013, so it's a little bit older than the last one we looked at. There is the object now coming into frame. They're tracking it. Okay, change the lens, zoom in on that. Then it pops up. What the hell is that thing? Floating around on the screen. Now my big head's covering it right now. Let me see if I can get rid of myself. There we go. There it comes back. And it's floating around in and out of frame. And they're trying to track this thing. And it does look like it's kind of leaving a little bit of a tail or a trail behind it. Okay. See that exhaust or something? Is this a snowflake on the lens? I don't think so. 2013, we don't have a lot of drones out there. This thing's bouncing around like one of those things you have to shoot in a video game. Okay. And so this continues on. It's about 1 minute and 46 seconds. So there's about 36 seconds of this left. And Anna Paulina Luna posted about this. So we'll take a look at what she said this may be. No corroborating report, but that's a weird one. Gina says it might be an angel. RP, same thing. And I think that's what Luna was saying. So then it takes off. See that? Just bounces right out of the frame. So at that last second, don't know if the aircraft changes trajectory or what, but it says hello, kisses the crosshairs, and then gone. Had enough. Okay, so we see that Anna Paulina Luna shared this one. Just posting this image, that's all, right there, which has a close resemblance to it. She, of course, has been working on the UAP program for quite some time. You take a look at what she's referencing here, and it looks like this, an ophonym. Alternatively spelled in different ways, refers to the wheels seen in Ezekiel's vision of the chariot. Ezekiel 1:15 through 21. One of the Dead Sea Scrolls construes them as angels. Late sections of the book of Enoch portray them as a class of celestial beings, along with the cherubim and the Sephirim. They never sleep, but they guard the throne of God. In some systems of Christian angelology, they are also one of the choirs or the classes of angels and are also identified as thrones. These wheels have been associated with Daniel 7:9 and other things. The book of Enoch calls them the many-eyed ones. They say actually the wheels may be the Lord's heavenly chariot. And it's in various prayers in the Orthodox Church. The Rosicrucian cosmo-conception refers to the Lord of the Flame, the hierarchy of the Elohim, astrologically assigned to Leo. And interesting things going on. Now, apparently people on DMT have reported seeing similar things, and I think that these were imageries that popped up in visions of early folks. So wild. All right, so that's that one. Did we capture an angel on camera? I don't know. All right, so we have that. Now let's also take a look at this one. So we have Gemini 7, and this is a conversation that occurred on board Gemini 7. So Gemini 7 was a flight up in 1965, one of the first during the batch of the first of sending people up into outer space, Americans. We had a crew of Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, spent nearly 14 days in space. They made a total of 206 orbits. Their spacecraft was also the passive target for the first crewed space rendezvous performed by crew Gemini 6A. So first people up to outer space, up in the 1960s. And here's an exchange of their conversation. saying the audio contains air-to-ground communications and the NASA Public Affairs audio feed with commentary recorded during the flight of the Gemini 7 mission. In this excerpted segment of audio, astronaut Frank Borman reports to the NASA Mission Control in Houston his sighting of an unidentified object, which he referred to as a bogey. This sighting occurred on December 5, 1965. The dialogue includes his initial report as well as additional comments by astronaut Jim Lovell, his fellow crew member. And so audio here from outer space. Here's what it sounds like.
Gemini Control here again. Earlier in the flight, you'll recall at the start of the second revolution, we had a reference to several objects that the crew spotted. This was in the area of Antigua. Due to a mechanical breakdown, we did not have that portion of the tape available for you. This was a line breakdown between Building 30 and our news center in Building 6. Since then, we have dubbed a tape off the master tape here in the control center, and we are now prepared to play it for you. It contains references to sighting not only some particles, but as well as an unidentified object, plus the booster. Here's that tape. We'll play it for you now.
Gemini 7 here, Houston, out of your 8.
Loud and clear. 7, go ahead.
Bogey at 10 o'clock high.
This is Houston. Say again, 7.
So we have a bogey at 10 o'clock high.
Roger. Gemini 7, is that the booster or is that an actual sighting?
What?
Say again, 7.
Okay, we have several, looks like the 3 up here, actual sighting.
You have any more information, estimated distance or size?
But we also have the booster in sight.
Understand you also have the booster in sight, Roger.
And we have very, very many, looks like hundreds of little particles going by to the left out about 3 to 4 miles.
Understand you have many small particles going by on the left. At what distance?
4 miles. Large, looks like perhaps a vehicle that's disintegrated.
Roger, understand they're about 3 to 4 miles away.
They're past now, they're going to pull a little bit.
Roger, and understand they were about 3 to 4 miles away.
Try the pier line, or further.
Roger. Gemini 7, Houston, were these particles in addition to the booster and the bogey at 10 o'clock high? Roger.
7, this is, Houston, this is 7.
Go ahead.
I have the booster on my side as a brilliant body of the sun against a black background and with billions of particles around it.
Roger, what direction is it from you?
It's about at my 2 o'clock position.
Does that mean it's ahead of you?
It's affirmative. Ahead of us, 2 o'clock, slowly tumbling.
Roger.
Okay. They're all talking to each other. Do you have any other spaceships up there? Jim? Anyone?
OS91. Fox 91. Oh, Fox 1. 91, say again.
The aliens get him? All right. So there's about a minute left in this video.
Gemini Control here again. The reference in that conversation to the third unidentified object, of course, was, or the third object, was Bogey. There were several references to the Bogey. This is the unidentified object, in addition to particles which appear to be headed in a polar orbit, you heard Frank Borman say, plus Jim Lovell discussing the booster. It was Borman who reported sighting the Bogey. This is Gemini Control Houston at 4 hours, 24 minutes into the flight.
Okay. So a bogey up there in outer space when nobody is up there in outer space, and it's not the booster because you can see the booster over there. All right. So here's more. Now, after the Gemini mission, we had the Apollo mission. So this was back in 1969. So Gemini, the one we just listened to, was in 1965. This one is a little bit later. And this is an interview and an exchange between the people who were on this mission. And so they explain Apollo 11 was the third crewed mission to the moon and the first to land astronauts on the lunar surface. This is Neil Armstrong. This document is an excerpt from the Apollo 11 technical crew debriefing from July 31, 1969. The document highlights 3 observations. 1, an object on the way out to the moon. 2, flashes of light inside the cabin. And 3, a sighting on the return trip of a bright light tentatively assumed to be the crew to be a laser. And we'll read the whole transcript here, but this is Apollo 11, July 16th through 24th, 1969. Buzz Aldrin on the moon, subject of a lot of controversy and myth busting and other things. The mission had Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, who stayed up in the airplane in the spacecraft, and Buzz Aldrin, who went on the moon with Neil Armstrong. So we're all familiar with this one. Here's how this exchange went down. Confidential. It looks like 251 total pages. Would like to read the rest of it. This is the Apollo 11 technical crew debriefing, July 31, 1969. So right when they come back, they've come back, looks like right around July 24th. Land, and then we get this. Now, this document is exempt from FOIA, okay? You're not getting it. So if somebody asks for it, don't give it to them. Here's this exchange from Collins. You know, I think particularly when you get into the later flights of extended EVAs and lunar activity, somehow the crew must place themselves in a frame of mind of looking on the separation of the LM as the beginning of the flight plan and to relax, get plenty of sleep, and conserve their energies in all the events leading up to that point. To arrive in lunar orbit tired can create problems, and it's possible to do that if you don't approach it in the right frame of mind. Neil Armstrong responds, I think Mike's hit the nail on the head. We did precisely that. We got a lot of rest and got into lunar orbit eager to go to work, and that's a particularly fortunate position to be in. Collins, who stayed up in the craft. Yeah, this is something we've talked about before the flight, and I don't know how you can get yourself in that frame of mind, but I think it is a frame of mind. You have to get yourself convinced that there will be a nice, relaxing couple of days going to the moon. Aldrin, the first unusual thing that we saw, I guess, was 1 day out or something pretty close to the moon. It had a sizable dimension to it, so we put a monocular on it. Collins, and how do we see this thing? I think they're talking to each other. How do we see this thing? Did we just look out the window and there it was? Aldrin, yes. And we weren't sure, but what it might be, the SIVB. So we called the ground and we were told, no, the SIVB was 6,000 miles away. We had a problem with the high gain about this time, didn't we? Collins, yeah, there was something. We felt a bump, or maybe I just imagined it. Armstrong, He was wondering whether the mesa had come off. I don't guess we felt anything, says Collins. Aldrin, of course, we were seeing all sorts of little objects going by at the various dumps, and then we'd happen to see this one brighter object going by. We couldn't think of anything else it could be other than the SIVB. We looked at it through the monocular, and it seemed to have a bit of an L shape to it. Yeah, Armstrong says, like an open suitcase, you know? Yeah, we were in the PTC at the time, so each one of us had a chance to take a look at this, and it certainly seemed to be within our vicinity and of a very sizable dimension. We should say that it was right at the limit of the resolution of the eye. It was very difficult to tell just what shape it was, says Armstrong, and there was no way to tell the size without knowing the range, or the range without knowing the size. So Aldrin says, so then I got down in the LEB, and I started looking for it in the optics. We were grossly misled because with the sextant off focus, what we saw appeared to be a cylinder. Armstrong says, or really just two rings. Yes, says Aldrin. Yeah, two rings, says Armstrong. Two connected rings. Like a ring here and a ring here that are connected. Then Collins says, no, it looked like a hollow cylinder to me. It didn't look like two connected rings. You could see this thing tumbling, and when it came around end on, you could look right down in its guts. It was a hollow cylinder, but then you could change the focus on the sextant and it would be replaced by this open book shape. It was really weird. And Aldrin says, I guess there's not too much more to say about it other than it wasn't a cylinder. Colin says it was during the period that when we thought it was a cylinder that we inquired about the SIVB, and we'd almost convinced ourselves that's what it had to be. But we don't have any more conclusions than that, really. The fact that we didn't see it much past this one time period, we really don't have a conclusion as to what it might have been, how big it was, or how far away it was. It was something that wasn't part of the urine dump. We're pretty sure of that. He says, skipping ahead a bit, when we jettisoned the LM, you know, we fired an explosive charge and got rid of the docking rings, and the LM went boom. Pieces came off the LM. It could have been some mylar or something that had somehow come loose from the LM. Aldrin says, we thought it could have been a panel, but it didn't appear to have that shape at all. Colin says, that's right. Yeah, and for some reason, we thought it might have been a part of the high gain antenna. It might have been about the time that we had a high gain antenna problem. In the back of my mind, I have some reason to suspect that its origin was from the spacecraft. Aldrin says, the other observation that I made accumulated gradually. I don't know whether I saw it the first night, but I'm sure I saw it the second night. I was trying to go to sleep with all the lights out. I observed what I thought were little flashes inside the cabin, spaced a couple of minutes apart, and I didn't think too much about it other than just a note in my mind that they continued to be there. I couldn't explain why my eye would see these flashes. During Trans-Earth Coast, we had more time and I devoted more opportunity to investigating what this could have been. It was at that point that I was able to observe on two different occasions that instead of observing just one flash, I could see double flashes at points separated by maybe a foot. At other times, I could see a line with no direction of motion, and the only thing that comes to my mind is that this is some sort of a penetration. At least that's my guess. Without too much to support it, some penetration of some object into the spacecraft that causes an emission as it enters the cabin itself. Maybe the Van Allen belts, solar radiation. Sometimes it was a flash on entering, possibly departing from an entirely different part of the cabin outside the field of view. The double flashes appeared to have an entry and then impact on something such as the struts. For a while, I thought it might have been some static electricity because I was also able, in moving my hand up and down the sleep restraint, to generate very small sparks of static electricity. But there was a definite difference between the two as I observed it more and more. I tried to correlate this with the direction of the sun. When you put the window shades up there is still a small amount of leakage. You can generally tell within 20 or 30 degrees the direction of the sun. It seemed as though they were coming from that general direction. However, I really couldn't say if there was near enough evidence to support that these things were observable on the side of the spacecraft where the sun was. A little bit of evidence seemed to support this. I asked others if they had seen any of these, and until about the last day, they hadn't. Armstrong says, Buzz, I'd seen some light, but I just always attributed this to sunlight, because the window covers leak a little bit of light no matter how tightly secured. The only time I observed it was the last night when we really looked for it. I spent probably an hour carefully watching the inside of the spacecraft, and I probably made 50 significant observations in this period. Aldrin says, sometimes a minute or two would go by, and then you'd see the two within the space of 10 seconds. On average, I'd just as guess it was maybe something like a minute. Certainly more than enough to convince you that it wasn't an optical illusion. It did give you a rather funny feeling to contemplate that something was zapping through the cabin. There wasn't anything you could do about it. Armstrong says it could be something like Buzz suggested, mainly a neutron or some kind of atomic particle that would be in the visible spectrum. And a little bit more. Most of the items in section 21, so we fast forward, visual sightings have been previously reported, says Armstrong. Aldrin says there was only one minor observation returning from the moon. Looking back at it, at a time after Mars had passed behind the moon, there was one time period where I imagined that the image of Mars was coming from a region where it couldn't come from, because it was in a dark portion of the moon. This obviously was an optical illusion of some sort. Armstrong says, I suspect that it was, in fact, just immediately adjacent to the horizon. We must have looked at it immediately after it had come from the backside. Yes, says Armstrong. In lunar orbit following ascent, we did note and mention to the ground that approaching CDH when the Earth came up above the lunar horizon, I observed what appeared to be a fairly bright light source, which we tentatively ascribed to a possible laser. That seemed to be the best possible explanation until we were coming back in the command module approaching the Earth, and we were able to observe something that gave about the same appearance. When putting the monocular on the light source, it appeared as though it was the reflection of the sun from a relatively smooth body of water, such as a lake. I think we revised our initial conclusion as to what the source of that light was that we saw coming from Earth. If no one owns up to having beamed the laser toward the moon at the time, it was more probably a reflection off a lake. I still think it's an unusual phenomenon at that distance to see so bright a source of light. In the film, it didn't appear as though this was going to show up at all. The Earth was too bright. From the Apollo astronauts. So then we've got this final update here on FBI 302. This came about late 2025. So fast forwarding way ahead. This is an interview conducted with a senior U.S. intelligence official about his firsthand account of a UAP encounter at a U.S. military facility. U.S. person relayed to the FBI agents that he and other federal and state personnel conducted searches to where orbs had been previously seen. After searching the area with a helicopter, they found a super hot orb hovering above the ground. The orb is reported to have traveled for 20 miles at a speed too fast for the helicopter in pursuit. An additional swarm of lights were seen in moving in all directions. A total of 4 or 5 additional orbs were seen shortly thereafter for a short time, flaring up and then down. This pattern of 4 or 5 orbs flaring up then down continued over the next 30 minutes across the area. So here's the FBI 302, an interview. On redacted date 2025 at 1700 hours, witness is a senior U.S. intelligence official, Federal Partner 1, Federal Partner 2, accompanied by Witness 2, another senior U.S. intelligence official, and 2 pilots from this state organization departed the redacted coordinates here via a helicopter to conduct a daytime aerial search of a mountain range. Previous eyewitness reports from personnel who observed orbs and lights cited hearing thuds as if something had fallen and hit in the ground. Earlier that day, this office completed a successful test of the redacted at this location. Now at 1751 hours, redacted spotted a large cavern entrance and conducted a short orbit of the location. At 2050, this individual landed west of this location and dropped off Witness 2 with Federal Partner 3. At 2052, 2 minutes later, call sign 1 headed towards the site to refuel. Second helicopter briefly landed at the site to await refueling, but then lifted off and returned to the base. Then at 2141, call sign 1 lifted off from the site and headed toward debris spotted by the listening posts, personnel using forward-looking infrared and night vision goggles, located approximately 4 miles east of the site, codename in the mountains location here. Call sign 1 orbited the location while searching with the pilots and the naked eye with the aid of a helicopter spotlight in near full darkness and for several minutes with negative results. Then at 21:49, call sign 1 departed the search location to return back to base and got a notification that redacted had redacted hits bearing redacted miles out from the location. Oh, we got one. Go. Then at 22:02, they arrived at those coordinates. 21:49, they get a ping. 22:02, they're there. So they're hunting these things. Spotted a possible aircraft on the horizon moving away to the west. LPOP confirmed the sighting and then relayed they spotted an orb under infrared and described as super hot, hovering at ground level before heading bearing redacted from LPOP. They reported that the orb was heading east and then south at a high rate of speed and then broke into two objects. This orb pops apart. They're breaking up. Directed call sign 1 to head south to intercept them. Then at 22:07, JOC reported 5 military aircraft from redacted were in the space conducting a training mission. Once on station, call sign 1 searched the location with FLIR, NVG, and the naked eye, but did not locate the orb. LPOP reported the orb gained elevation, came within 10 feet of him, and then headed east to redacted. Call sign 1 moved to intercept, but LPOP reported the orb continued southeast and estimated it to be past the road name here, 20 miles away, like that. Unable to match the speed, this person, call sign 1, broke off pursuit. However, the co-pilot reported seeing under NVG something emerge from the two objects and then travel in a different direction at a high rate of speed. At 22:18, call sign 1 remained at coordinates awaiting instructions when the pilots spotted a swarm of lights, too many to count, moving in all directions but generally located west of redacted and headed south. JOC relayed they contacted the military aircraft who were en route to assist. At 22:27, call sign 1 lost visual of the swarm. Similarly, at 22:27, possibly out of order, in proximity headed south, witness 1 to the naked eye and pilots spotted 2 large orbs appear in close proximity to call sign 1 to the west and above the rotor disc. From the naked eye perspective, the 2 orbs appeared to flare up and remain stationary side by side. They appeared to be oval shape, orange in color with a white or yellow center and emitting light in all directions. After a few seconds, a third orb flared up below the 2 and then another one below that one until there were 4 or 5 in total below the original 2. It's like a sci-fi movie. After a few seconds, the orbs began to flare down in reverse order while appearing to be stationary until visual was lost. Then a minute later, 22:28, witness 1, call sign 1, and the pilot spotted 4 or 5 orbs appearing to head west over the mountains above the military aircraft. They flared up at one time in a horizontal formation and after 10 to 15 seconds flared down in the opposite order. Then at 22:33, they spotted a similar formation near this town. What town is that? The orbs flared up at one time in a horizontal formation and after 10 to 15 seconds flared down in the opposite order. Lost visual. 22:41, pilots spotted a similar flare up west of this site. After several seconds, they flared down and lost visual. 22:49, while positioned, pilots spotted another swarm, 3 distinct orbs in a triangle this time. 22:52, 10 miles north, 5 to 6 orbs flare up at one time, horizontal, and then flare down in opposite order. 22:57, 10 miles again north, spotted 4 orbs flare up over the military aircraft. As they descended to land at this location, the orbs flared up at one time in a horizontal formation. After 10 seconds, flared down, lost visual. Then they returned to base. They also, what the hell was that? 23:20, headed southbound, already in air-to-air contact with another partner, passing each other. Witness 1 says, pilots indicated that they were recording. However, many sightings were above the helicopter, which was outside of the helicopter's camera angle. Some things I could not see with the naked eye, but I recall the pilots calling out the sightings. The orbs appeared to break off from call sign 1 and pursue the military aircraft. All right. The heck is going on, man? So that's what was released. Fox News also put together a little summary of everything. And Ducey says he got the video. Here's some more stuff that they were able to piece together from all the drops that happened today.
Right here. So let's go to the first clip. Over the skies of the United Arab Emirates in June 2024. An inverted teardrop with a vertically linear trailing mass, as described by the War Department, suspended below. The War Department cannot say for sure what this is. It is officially listed as an unresolved UAP report. The next video, over the skies of Iraq, December 2022, moving bottom left to top right of the field of view. All CENTCOM gets from this is an area of contrast. That's what they describe it as. It is officially still listed as an unresolved UAP report. Next video, over the skies of Greece, October 2023, what is described as a small and circular UAP flying near the surface of the ocean towards land. CENTCOM can't tell us what it is. It is officially listed as an unresolved UAP report. Within the last 2 minutes, all of these videos have gone live on war.gov/UFO, and a White House official tells Fox First, while past administrations sought to discredit or dissuade the American people, President Trump is focused on providing maximum transparency to the public, who can ultimately make up their own minds about the information contained in these files. And there's also a fresh look at some historical records. There's this from a...
Yeah, so some of those things I think look like they could just be, you know, objects like a missile, right? That kind of looks like it could be a missile. We have drones. Like a lot of these are newer things. I don't know exactly what this thing was that's doing those 90-degree turns, or what this, no, that's that one. Where's the other one? This one. The heck is that thing? Doesn't look like a drone we've seen. This is from 2013 in the Middle East, like stuff like that. All right, so we don't know what it is exactly. You may know. Tim Burchett says, remember, the feds told us that these files didn't exist, dadgummit, and Trump stood up to the deep state. The first drop will be big, but in comparison to what is coming, they will be a drop in the bucket. I would say, holy crap is coming. So, all right. What is out there? Cue the X-Files theme. Whatever it is. All right, so let me know what you think about these, and we'll see if we have little green men in the next drop. All right, friends, what a beautiful stream it has been today. Happy Friday. Hopefully it's been a beautiful week for you as well. If you're just getting here, now it's time to hear from you, but we had a good update, huge win out of Virginia. As we saw, 4-3 decision saying that the gerrymandered rigged maps are now invalid. Tremendous news in the great gerrymandering battle happening across America. We read through the full decision. It was largely about the definition of the word election, election day versus election, general election, how to define those. Million plus people were disenfranchised by this rigged ballot measure, which never went through the proper procedure. The Democrats very unhappy about this. This woman screaming outside the Supreme Court, and the AG out there, hopefully not going to murder any of his political opponents like he said that he would in those text messages. So we got through that. We had some fun memes here. We heard from the RNC celebrating the big win. Then we looked at some UFO stuff. Bunch of stuff got published on war.gov/UFO. We looked at some of the more interesting ones, I thought. Read through some transcripts from Neil Armstrong, listened to some Gemini testimony, and Tim Burchett says, you haven't seen the dadgum half of it yet. So now, my friends, it is time to hear from you, and we'll see what you have to say about all of this. I saw some donos come in. Thank you for sending these in on this Friday afternoon/evening. Donut, thank you for clipping for us. And Rick D's in the house says here, he's a sky jumper, parachuter. So he's correcting us on some of the vernacular. Thank you for that, Rick D. We've got some other comments. What's happening? Oh, yeah, Hakeem. We got new membos coming in. Thank you, Mock Schnell. Man, a lot of donos today. Thank you, friends. Oh, this is why they're here. It's to get all the cats. Oh, got it. Amazing. So it's the... Don't take our feline friends out of here, aliens. Rick D., the Utah Supreme Court Justice who helped the gerrymander there has resigned. Diana Hagan resigns amid the Utah legislature's investigation. I thought I saw a headline that she may have been having an indictment problem with somebody else, some other lawyer in the state of Utah. I don't know. But, you know, there's a lot of indicting each other going on in the legal profession, apparently. Thank you, Rick D. Michelle, you know, I'm curious, when courts set bonds, let's say for illegal aliens, where does the bond money go? Who gets the money? The court? Well, it stays in like a trust, essentially, right? So you post the bond. The bond is supposed to secure your appearance. So if you appear and you complete, you know, everything, then you get your money back, right? So there's, you know, the states, a lot of states do it very differently. And it can be, you know, kind of complicated how much you need to post and what are the rules around it. But it's like think of it like a trust, or like when you do a transaction in a mortgage, like escrow kind of a thing. It's like a holding center. So the way the system should work ideally is you post your bond, they let you out, the bond secures your appearance. Once you come back, then you get your money back. Like you close your case out, you don't go to jail, you know, so you get your bond back, you go to jail. Once you come out, you get your bond back. If you abscond, then you forfeit that bond, right? Then the bond will go to the court. If you use a bail bond company, like what you see, like these bailsters come out, then they have an interest in going to get you so that they don't have to forfeit the bond. Because some bond companies will only make you post a certain amount of the bond and then they'll cover the rest, kind of a thing. And then it's on them to make sure that you're coming back. So now you've got a bond company that's kind of securing your appearance because you can't post a full $100,000 bond. Some states require you to post, 10%. But ideally, it's like escrow, right? So the goal is that you don't forfeit your bond because you come back to court. It's to secure your appearance, and you should get that money back at the conclusion of the case. Thank you, Michelle. Mock Schnell, what's going on? 20 new membos here. Thank you, Mock Schnell. What a generous thing to do. And members, we'll see you back tomorrow on the members only stream. We had a great interview this morning. If you're a member, we had a great time doing a special interview this morning, which we'll be posting, I believe, on Sunday this week. Thank you, Mock Schnell. FQAWF, Stella Artois. What's up, Craig Zank? Paulo Valenti. We got Nick Sartini. Welcome. GT in the house. My imperfect process is here. All the marbles. Renee Levine, what's up? UN Avanas is here. Demon J, what's up? Wake Up to Reality, Single Wide. Ayo Cato TV, what's up? KD, Scotty B, Jungle Forever. We got Lisa Underhill, Dark Avenger, and Ben, you over in the house. Great to have you aboard. Thank you, Mock Schnell, for bringing in those amazing membos and for being a membo yourself. And hopefully we see you tomorrow on the Saturday stream. This old guy, stupid is as stupid does. Yeah, remember him? What is he doing? Is he going to go crack some heads open? Getting very close to insurrection there, Hakeem. Better be careful. Good to see you, this old guy. Glad you're back in the house. Hey, what's up, Steven? Steven Cooper. Hey, what's going on? Thank you for the info. Straight up from the cases, I get accused of just repeating Fox News. Keep up the work of bringing real information. Thank you, Steven Cooper. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, we play Fox News here as we did. Then we play a clip of CNN here today as we did. So we check in with the media. They normally have reporting there. But what we try to do differently here is go to the primary sources, right? Show the documents. Put the documents up on the screen rather than consolidating everything into a 2-minute soundbite. It takes a little bit more work to watch it all and to think about it rather than having, some anchor somewhere kind of. It's like regurgitated food. It's like a bird, right? Puking up into the other bird's mouth. They digest it, do a little bit of digestion for you, and then puke it back up into your mouth. And you're like, this is pretty gross. So we try to go to the primary sources and, look into it specifically, and then we can come to our own conclusions about it, which is what we do here. Thank you, Stephen Cooper, for being a membo. And thanks for the nice compliment and for the nice dono. Hope your week was amazing. Really glad that you're here and joining us. This old guy, Don't you love it when Rob's eyebrows become animated when he's reading any Supreme Court opinion that is a win? Little extra perky, little extra oomph behind those eyebrows. Yeah, nice victory over here. We like it when we're winning, baby. It's a new, it's a better energy than losing, for sure. So this old guy, thanks for noticing. Yeah, they're looking a little extra perky over there. Indeed. Indeed. Thank you, this old guy. Great to have you back. Hey, Amber. Oh, man, I'm sorry to hear this, Amber. Man, I'm really sorry to hear this. Okay, prayers up for Amber and her family, her 11-year-old daughter in her father's custody, which is just, it's brutal for an 11-year-old. She attempted to take her life. I'm supposed to know everything medically. The courts have been unfair and it's affecting my daughter's life. I'm sorry about that, Amber. We're praying for you. We're praying for your family. Very glad that your daughter's attempt was not successful. And so we'll send some love and some energy your way to pray that the courts see things in a way that ensures the safety of your daughter and the happiness of your family and the union of you and her. Sending your way. Prayers up. We have a lot of prayer warriors. Amber, thanks for sharing that with us so that we could send some energy your way. Lots of prayers in the chat coming in. Amber, thanks for that. Hey, Tim Jake. What's up, Tim Jake? 5 membos from Tim Jake. Says Raven Fear is here. Good to see you. Michael Shepard. What's up, Brian Moreland? What's up, FYR Fitter 16 in the house. And Real Estate by Kimmy is here. Good to see you, everybody. Tim Jake, thanks for bringing in 5 membo friends. Hopefully we see everybody tomorrow. It's going to be beautiful. Gauntlet KI, how can a 51% repeal overcome a 65% amendment? I think you're talking about Virginia. And yeah, I don't remember what the percentages were. I think as long as it goes to the voters, then the voters don't have to be at 65%, right? It's like it goes through the House, goes through both houses, then it lands with the voters. If the voters approve that after the 2 elections, then they can remove it. But I get your point, right? It feels like if you should be amending it under a certain standard, then the repeal should be by the same. But I think it's because it's going to the voters to approve the amendment. Rick D, hey, I saw that. Tyler Robinson had a hearing today. Said judge has ruled that cameras will be allowed in the courtroom during the trial, which is great news. Yeah, great news. Transparency. The preliminary hearing will now take place July 6th through July 10th. So it got postponed a little bit, I think. And so that has been confirmed as well. I think the defense was wanting to postpone that indefinitely, essentially. So great news. Thank you, Rick, for the heads up on that one. Mike Alvord, what's up? Hey, 11 months, Mike. Almost one happy anniversary to us. Thank you. Virginia Dems knew the law. The Supreme Court of Virginia would rubber stamp it. They thought that they would. They, of course, didn't. And I think that they wanted to ratify it with the vote. So as long as they could get a bunch of people to vote for it, they were thinking that no way they would disenfranchise all these voters. They didn't. They enfranchised the 1.3 million people that the Democrats disenfranchised in their process. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for being here for 11 months. Off-label podcast right next door on the YouTubes. Texas tried to redistrict like normal after the 2020 census. Biden stopped it for years. Trump dropped the case so the map can go through. Yeah, the Democrats have been doing this forever. Forever. Look at their states. There's no Republicans at all. And then the Republicans play the same game, and all of a sudden it's like a 5-alarm fire. Democracy's over. Jedi Trump, what's up? 7 months as a membo, almost a full baby. Jedi Trump, good to have you. Says, make insane asylums great again. Yeah, they might be pretty full, based on the condition of a large portion of the country. Bliss, though, what's up? I'm sick of people saying that Texas started this. That is false. The Democrats had a judge force a Democrat district on them in 21. They were in the courts and finally won. So are they just now getting to implement the map? They should have implemented in 2021. Yeah, no, it's always Trump is committing political retribution, but they weren't when they tried to jail him and raid his house and then tried to throw him off the ballot and so on and so forth. If it weren't for double standards, they would have no standards at all, as they say. Object Class Keeter, what's up? When Dems lose in court, the response is to pack it. Yeah, that might happen next. And I think at maybe both levels. I don't know about in Virginia. I think either way, they're out this election. Can they squeeze in, a new bill to pack the court in Virginia and then relitigate the whole thing? And then the new court would reverse their precedent. But your point is well taken. I mean, they're going to try that in the Supreme Court, no doubt, if they, God forbid, get power. Hey, the wickety whack. Could you imagine here how much worse this would have been if Ronna McDaniels was still the RNC chair? Yeah, I don't remember her being effective at much of anything. Hope you had a great time in North Carolina. Longtime Corolla resident. We did. It was beautiful. Yeah, we had a great time. We were on the beach. We went to some amazing donut places and restaurants. It was a great time. Joey found buried treasure with a metal detector on the beach, and the heart of the ocean from the Titanic washed ashore, and he found it. It was incredible. Amazing place. The Wiggity Whack, thanks for the nice dono. And shout out to our friends in North Carolina. Hey, the Mountain Goddess. Speaking of flying things, anyone still wondering whatever happened to those Chinese spy balloons? We won't hear about that information. No. Yeah, or the drones that were flying over like New Jersey. Remember that? Biden's, what was his name? The guy who did the press briefings when, what's her name? I blocked all those people out of my entire life. With Jean-Pierre. Yeah, Karine Jean-Pierre. The other guy would come out, John something. Well, nothing to worry about. They're just flying all over the place. Yeah, you always got your skepticism hat on. Anytime the government releases something, it's like, well, why are they giving us this now? Like, if there were really aliens and they had information about it, you'd think they'd give us things that would tell us that there are aliens out there. I have my doubts about it. Hey, anyways, thank you, Mountain Goddess. Spuds, where is his Illudium Q36 explosive space modulator? Oh, man. How can Marco fight the illegal space aliens without one? He's now the Martian, too? With that broom hat? Thank you, Spuds. That's a great photo. I can't believe he wore that into the Oval Office. Hey, Off-Label Podcast, thought that borders on heresy and blasphemy. What if warring aliens came here long ago? And to explain their presence to a being with the mind that equates to a toddler, angels and demons were born. So you're saying that angels and demons are not real. They're just kind of explanations for aliens. That's interesting. Yeah. And I think, people who are not believers might believe that is a justification for those concepts. So I would say that is probably, yeah. I mean, like if you're thinking that the angels are just aliens, then you're probably not a believer, and that would probably be a heretical thought that is not in alignment with church teachings. So I think it's probably pretty close, yeah. But if you do believe in angels and demons, I don't necessarily think that negates the fact that there could also be aliens. Like the idea that there's aliens or little green men on other planets, I think is perfectly consistent with faith. And I think that both can exist in actuality and probably do in actuality. But I think you could just say, there's a lot of, I think, earthly explanations for things that you read in the Bible. People just say, oh no, he was sleeping when Lazarus came back out. No, he was just sleeping in there and he just woke up because he was in a coma or something. Okay. Or Jesus was the Son of God and, resurrected him according to the scriptures. So I think that, yeah, it depends on your worldview and, kind of how you want to believe. I think you can have faith in one version or faith in the other version. Believing in aliens, being warring aliens and coming here, I think requires as much faith as any scriptural interpretation anyways. Like, what's your evidence for that? It's about as good as our evidence for the other side. So thank you, Off-Label. What's up, Dark Road? I'd like to point out that it seems so many times top secret reveals are hardly shocking and often a letdown. Not me, though. It shows just how detached and abusive the government is with classifying information. Yeah, in other words, everything is just overly classified, right? Like this stuff that we just saw today was classified for like 60 years. For what? Why couldn't they tell us about this conversation about seeing a suitcase up on the Apollo 11 mission? Yeah, and I think that's right. Everything is overly classified. It is, and that's kind of my point that I was saying earlier. It's like, I doubt that they would show us the good stuff. Here, peasants, here. Have some, space conversations. Stuff that is not really useful or all that meaningful. Like, what's the good stuff, man? What's the big one that Tim Burchett is saying is coming down? And why would Tim Burchett, by the way, as much as we like him, why would they give him access to those things? They wouldn't. I don't think. I don't think they would. And you also have to ask, like, why now? Obviously, Trump has come in and promised a lot of this, but is it a distraction from something else, regardless of who's doing the declassifications? And why are they declassifying stuff that's about aliens and not like the JFK files or like 9/11 stuff? It's like, okay, we got it. So it feels like a huge part of our government is just unknowable, probably even to people who are in charge of the agencies, which is a problem. If you're actually a self-governing people and you have a representative democracy that's actually representative of the people, then it shouldn't be so out of your reach to know what your own government is doing. Thank you, Dark Rogue. But it often feels like, as much as I thought these reveals were interesting, it's also like, all right, it doesn't give us answers to anything. It's just like, well, do what you want with it. Come to your own conclusions is really even what they said. Trump said that. Yeah, have fun. Have fun. Okay. Does Trump even know the truth of it? It reminds me of Independence Day when the president of the movie Independence Day doesn't know the details about what actually happens. And then he's like, wait, we have actual alien bodies once they invade? He's like, how come nobody told me about this? That feels more like it rings true than anything. Rick D says, correction, it's the S4B, Rob. 4 is the Roman numeral. Thank you, Rick D, for the correction. King of Biltong says, Biltong is one of the highest protein snacks available, incredibly satiating, helps to keep you fueled throughout the day. Go to BiltongUSA.com, use code Robert, and you'll save a delicious 10% off on your meats. Jonah Finn, I think most Americans are grossly underestimating the amount of the government that will be used to try to change what the government thinks people are thinking. From Seton Motley. Yeah, that makes sense. Like if you are in the government, you want people to think highly of the government and you have all of the tools available at your disposal in order to make that happen. And classifications and disclosures are one way to do that. And if anybody starts thinking differently with what the government wants you to think, you just call them a conspiracy theorist, which is what the CIA made up in order to accomplish that. Thank you, Jonah Finn. Hey, one old guy, the truth is out there. I want to believe, from the X-Files. Yeah, and so do I. It's like, I want to believe that there's, something wild out there. It's like, it'd be fun. It'd be exciting. There's aliens out there. They're communicating with us. We're going to go see Project Hail Mary tomorrow. My beautiful wife just bought tickets on that. We listened to the audiobook. If you have not listened to that audiobook, it's a great one. It's by Ray Porter, the audiobook. It's, the book is by Andy Weir, right? Audiobook, I can't imagine the movie's better than the audiobook, but it was a great audiobook. We listened to it on the way across the country, and it's great. He does all the voices. It's really good. So it's like, oh, that'd be cool. Maybe there's a rocky alien out there somewhere. Thank you, one old guy. Rob, see my X post on the live stream? I caught the illegal alien trying to take over the world. It's the Martian. This is made from a description from the supposed viewer. It's real. I caught it on camera myself. It's an illegal alien and it's coming over to take over the Earth. From Rob on X. It was the Martian the whole time. Hey, this one from Glenn Croy. Glenn Croy, good to see you. 33 months as a membo, says, you know who's the real alien? Kay Bean is the alien because she's out of this world. But and it's true. She is out of this world. She's like a galactic, amazing person. Thank you, Kay Bean. And thank you, Glenn Croy, for shouting out Kay Bean. She is quite galactic. Sheila Poo, a million hugs to you. Thank you for bringing in 10 new membos. We'll see everybody tomorrow morning. Grab the stream from this morning as well. It was a fun one. Ken B, Texas, what's up? Paladin STEM. ND Forever, what's up? Game Genie, we got James Giddings is here. Solace of Storms, the original Skycakes. What's up, Doan? Groucho Gouveia, what's up? Korea Effect, Astro Zombie, #1 fan of the U. Gifted membos, courtesy of Sheila Poo. A million hugs to you. Thank you, Sheila. Great to see you. Thanks for bringing in 10 new friends. See everybody in the morning. One old guy. Rapture by Blondie. In The Man from Mars, you go out at night, eating cars. Then, when there's no more cars, you go out at night and eat up the bars. Rapture by Blondie. Is that like a song? In The Man from Mars, you go out at night, eating cars. Then, when there's no more cars, you go out at night and eat up bars. Is that from that Tom Cruise movie where the aliens come in and blast everybody? I don't know. One old guy. Man, thank you for that. One old guy. You are amazing. Thank you for the nice dono. Off label. The drones were ours. I think the drone incidents we've been seeing is the military springing surprises to test our readiness for things like that. Like those orbs too. Like those orbs are testing the response time. Yeah, that was wild because like those are very serious people in military craft, chasing these things. And they released that to us. Maybe they are ours. I don't know, man. Off label. It would make sense. Like they would release something that's ours. Hey, bravo on the answer to the angel and demon thing. I'm agnostic. Thank you, off label. But seeing more signs from the Bible. Look up the red heifer story. I know about it. Doesn't matter if you believe it. It matters if they do. Yeah, I know. Haven't they accomplished that? Like they've raised the red heifers in Texas. They're over, I think, in Israel now. They've got like the ash of the red heifer. I think it's done, right? Like a done deal. Thank you, Off Label Pod. Yeah, what's up? Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. I think more and more signs reveal. For me, it's been as I get older a little bit, a lot of it starts to make more sense. I get a little bit more humility. I start to see more evil in the world. When you see more evil, the natural reaction is to say, what is this? And if that's real, then what is the counter of that? And then you can kind of reverse yourself into it in a way. Anyways, thank you. Joe, hey, what if they aren't aliens, but a past advanced civilization that survived a cataclysmic event like Atlantis was real, but we don't know the actual story? Yeah, I mean, I think there's some thesis around that. And like, what were the pyramids? How did they build those things? Were they tombs? No. Were they power plants? Maybe. What were those things powering? And if we've made a pretty big civilization in, 2,000 years, however far back you want to go on that, that's in the blink of an eye, the age of the planet. So I'm open to that, Joe. Hey, Sheila, government treats us citizens like kindergartners who can't handle reality or the truth. Yeah, it reminds me of Plato's cave, right? We're all sitting here shackled, watching the shadows on the wall, while simultaneously, or it's like the TV series like The Silo, where you are sold this fiction that is very convenient to keep people under a certain belief system. And if you knew the truth, then you might have a whole different perspective on how everything should work, and that would be very damaging to the people who are in power. But that's not self-governance. That's living as slaves. Hey, one old guy. Either God is true and aliens, ETs are false, or vice versa. My worldview is according to me and not God. Fallen angels from God's creation is true, not ETs. Either one is true and the other is false. If Satan is the father of lies, then that is all that I need. I see what you're saying, but why, if God is true, like if God is true, the creator of heaven and earth, and then that includes the heavens, that includes everything else out there, why would aliens be in contravention to what's in the Bible or what God is? Is it because the Bible talks about man and human and, mankind and these things and not alien kind? Would that just be an application of God's teachings to our realm, not necessarily implicating the other realms? I think it's a very interesting question, one old guy. And maybe we'll learn soon once the aliens show up. Hey, Elvis, what's up? Yeah. So last question about bond. Does the court or county government get any of the money if the person charged doesn't show up to court? Yeah, I think they get all that. You forfeit the bond to the court. Would the court make any money by posting bonds for people they won't show, that they know won't show? So the court is not posting the money, right? So you have to post the bond. And if you don't show, then you forfeit that bond, right? So then you go, and that's sort of like a penalty, because then the court will issue an arrest warrant for you. So you get charged with a major felony. You have to post a $10,000 bond, and they'll let you out. Many states, are no bond now, so they just let you out. Oh, you murdered somebody in California? That's okay. Here's your gun back. Go out and do it again. But if you do post your bond, then that secures your appearance. So the court's not posting anything. And I guess what you're saying is, like, does the court have an incentive to make you post a bond, knowing that you won't show up and they can keep the money and it's forfeited to the state ultimately? Yeah, maybe. But then they issue an arrest warrant for you, and that warrant is in effect until you come back, right? And you still forfeit the bond, and now you're in violation of, now you've got new charges, a failure to appear, which is typically a new charge. And the judge is going to say, now you have a failure to appear on your record, so I'm not going to issue a bond. And so now you are non-bondable, and we're not going to let you out again. But this is part of the policy debate that ultimately happens, which is why some states say that there shouldn't be bonds, because it's kind of enables the rich to get out of custody, whereas the poor, even if it's like a $100 bond or a $500 bond or something like that, for a lot of people, that's not doable. So then they have to sit in custody pending the resolution of their case, whereas somebody else just posts bond and they're released. So it's a debatable question, but the court is not posting the bonds for people who won't show. And I think I see what you're asking. It's like, are they allowing bonds for people who they know will not show? And or because there's a financial incentive there, I mean, maybe. But then the court has an open case file. So like there's a disincentive there. They have an open case file. Now they have a warrant. Now they've basically made a bad decision because the judge made a bad decision by granting a bond to somebody who didn't show up. And courts, a lot of them want to reduce those numbers of FTAs, failures to appear, and that's part of their metrics. So how many warrants are out? How many closed cases did they close in a quarter? How many open cases are at warrant status? And if those get too big, then the idea is the courts in the administrative proceedings are saying, why do you have so many open cases? Why do you have so many warrants? Why are you granting all these people bonds? The goal is to close the cases, not to have a bunch of open failures to appear. So there's a counter incentive to that as well. But a lot of people really disagree with bonds. And for that reason, Mountain Goddess, 5 new membos. What's up, Carl Warren, Mountain Goddess? Thank you for bringing in 5 new membos. Carl Warren, welcome. AAAJJJ in the house. Angela's here. Rhonda Thompson and Rainy Dazed. All gifted membos, courtesy of Mountain Goddess. You rock. Thank you, Mountain Goddess. Welcome, new membos. We'll see you in the morning. Hey, this one. Well, that didn't take long. Figured this one was coming. And Commonwealth want a delay in the mandate, defer the issuance of this up because they're going to the Supreme Court of the United States. Of course. I don't know what SCOTUS is going to do. I think SCOTUS might just say, hey, it's a state constitutional issue. There's not even any federal issues implicated in this whole thing. Petition denied. Case is closed. We'll see. Hey, one old guy, Pontius Pilate asked, what is truth? I am the way, the truth, and the life. Let God be found true, though every man be found a liar. Well, I mean, what if Jesus showed up on the alien planets? I don't know. What if they sent him to the other planets and said, hey, the only way to God is through Jesus, and they put him on, Galactia 5 or whatever. Maybe he's just doing trips all over the galaxy and all over the universe. I don't know. But I don't know why they have to be incompatible. You know, truthfully. I understand the sacredness and the divinity of, you know, the human experience and this special relationship, but it's God. And did God make all of these other like limitless planets, like billions and billions of galaxies with billions of stars in there, and there's no other life on there? Do they have Jesus? Did they get a version of Jesus? I don't know. But I guess we'll find out. We'll have to ask them when they get here. All right. So friends, thank you so much for all those generous donations. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us and for being here. Let's see if we got any other additional comments on locals and on X and elsewhere. And then we'll wrap it up on the day. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow morning for our members only Saturday stream. Let's see if we got any other cues here. What's going on? Michael Woodward. The case in VA is a textbook example of why we are a constitutional republic and not a democracy. Democracy is a built-in flaw that the electorate can vote away with their own freedoms, regardless of what the Constitution says. Yeah, and democracy is very whimsical. The passions of the mob flows both ways. Baby Lewis, hey, great show this morning. It's awesome how you come up with awesome questions that fit your guest you are interviewing and just keep it flowing. Can't wait for more as we learn topics that are happening to people. God bless. Thank you, Baby Lewis, for being here. Star says, they must have heard your rage over the Platinum Plus justice system for illegals. Yeah, America Premium version, Platinum Plus America for illegals only. This is the violent 25 plus arrested illegals who just murdered that woman in February. You've barely been there 2 months and you're already affecting change. You just needed to move closer so they'd hear you. Hope this is the first domino to fall. I won't hold my breath for the judges, though. Over from Fairfax County, Virginia, Commonwealth's Attorney investigation from Star. Thank you, Star. And my friends, thank you for being here. Hey, Trump, he knows an alien, see? That's the drop that we're looking for. That's the one that we're looking for from Spuds. And Amy Ann says, oh no, the alien chemtrails. KPM Kit says, even Trump, you can stuff this horse poop. Are you talking about the alien stuff? Well, I don't know. I guess, you know, I feel like some releases are better than no releases. But we want the good stuff. We want the bodies of the aliens and the DNA. Hey, what's up, Rob? This was made from a description. This is Martian, the alien. He came in. He's also invading. We need a space wall next. Hey, Neuro D, thanks for flagging our locals, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. That is here, watchingthewatchers.locals.com or on YouTube. Thank you for joining up on any platform that best suits you. Jacob, what's up, Jacob? Do you think they will change for 2028? The Democrats? No, they're going to be the same. They are who they are. But maybe you're asking about the maps. Maybe, yeah, because Abigail Spanberger's in there for a while. I think both the House and the Senate in the, you know, the state legislature and the General Assembly, I think they're both very blue right now. So I think that they'll try it again. Like they'll try to reverse those maps for 2028 for sure. Now, will there be 2 successive elections in there? Like the timing is complicated. So if they reintroduce it like tomorrow and then vote on it, I know, special session, vote on it in between now, like maybe after this November election, then vote on it again. Then it was that 2 elections, and then can they get it in for 2028? Maybe. I'd have to think, you have to like really do a timeline analysis on that, but maybe they'll try. I'm sure they're going to try to fix whatever happened here and cram it down everyone's throat. Hey, Joe, remember, we are not separate from the universe. This planet is still the universe, not separate from it. We can choose our emotions and vibes. We can choose to bring positivity into the universe or not. Yeah, great comment. Yeah, and aren't we all, you know, kind of connected anyways? Like there's this soul and this spirit. And I don't, it's complicated. It feels like this human experience is just a temporary, our bodies are just fleshy vessels for our souls. And if there is eternity, right, if there is heaven and earth for all of eternity, there's a different plane somewhere else. And maybe that connects us to the aliens. I don't know, Joe. Thank you for that. It's true. It's true. It's very complicated stuff. We're gonna figure the answer to this out about our immortal souls here. Thanks for subscribing. Hey, Joe, thank you for that. One old guy, who told you there are billions of stars and planets? It was not God, it was man. I think so. I think it's, part of the observations that people are making. I've looked through telescopes. We might be looking at shadows on the wall out there. We might all be living on the flat earth or the hot dog earth or whatever. I don't know. But didn't God give us the capabilities to reason and to see things and to explore and to deduce and to understand the nature around us? And if he did all those things, which I do believe he did, then aren't what we seeing part of the plan and our yearn to explore and to go check out brave new worlds, all the things? One old guy, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I think that is true, definitely. Otherwise, if you don't feel fear the Lord, then you really are thinking there is nothing to fear and you are the Lord in yourself. You are not subject to a higher power. You are your own power, which is a very dangerous place to be, because then there is no one to be accountable to other than yourself. And as humans, we are all flawed. And then you think you are God and you become a Democrat. Sharpie guy. Hey, about this morning's stream, Hello Sharpness never broke stride, and I had friends ask me if I felt bad for spreading the jab. I worked in vinegar every day, so never crossed my mind that I could, in fact, never even get the flu shot, and I never got it. Watchers, be blessed. Nice, Sharpie guy. Very nice. You worked in vinegar every day. Interesting. Vinegar distillery or something? Thank you, Sharpie guy. One old guy. The father of lies has already since Roe versus Wade that it is a human right to end life in the womb. Well, that's my point. Yeah, it's about transgression, right? If you don't have a higher power, then you are the higher power. And then that means really anything in society that is set up in a term of morality, you can transgress because there is no objective authority over the entire structure. Joe, got to try mushrooms, Rob. Thank you for that recommendation, Joe. Will I see some space aliens? Interesting. Sounds fun. All right. Thank you, Joe. All right, friends. Thank you for sending those in and for all of those amazing comments and the fun, friendship, and frivolity. It's great to be here. All right, so we're going to pause here for the day. Once again, thank you for subscribing if you haven't already done that. We'll pause here. It's been a beautiful week. Some very good wins and successes this week. But now it is time to pause and unplug, restore, rejuvenate so that we can return even more roaring and ready to go. Want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths before we close it out. We got Muffin Rando. What's up, John in the house? We got Donut Mind Me, K Bean in the chat, Carrie B. We got Neuro D, Janek, Dog Digger, Geegum Geegum, Elliot, Doc Master, and just Rhonda, purveyor of the fine emojis. All modding the fort down for us, keeping things nice and orderly. Yeah, mushrooms might fry your brain, right? I might come out and be like, this show is now about the earth and the moon. And today, we're going to read some poetry together. Everybody would bail out instantly. Rightfully so. All right, so friends, we're going to pause here. It's a beautiful weekend. Happy Friday. Hopefully you're doing something fun and exciting, relaxing, rejuvenating, restoring, and returning back here on Monday to get into it again. Of course, we're going to have some good posts this weekend. I think on Sunday we'll have that interview ready to get posted with our friend Adam Johnson, who's running for county commissioner seat in Manatee, Florida. And we had a great conversation about all of the double standards that are out there. So come back on Sunday and definitely check that out again. Otherwise, I hope that your weekend is beautiful. I hope you rest up. I hope you restore, rejuvenate. Come back on Monday. We'll get into it again. Until we are back here, my friends, have a great weekend. Make it a beautiful Friday night. And we'll see you right back here on Monday. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. We brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we exposed corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through the scripted ruse. Together we are watching the watchers, shining the light. Watching the watchers, defending what's right. Watching the watchers, stay each night together and live.